Hello, and welcome to the Salvation from Destruction podcast. On this episode, I'd like to welcome Police Sergeant Dave Westin. Dave has been a police officer for over 22 years, and I was honored and blessed to work with Dave for 18 of those years. 5 of those years we spent together as partners in the investigations division. Dave always strives to do the right thing and works hard to arrest offenders and give victims justice. I can honestly say Dave's integrity is beyond reproach, and he's an inspiration to his fellow officers through his hard work and dedication on the job. During his tenure as a police officer, Dave has received the Chief's Award for helping solve a 12-year-old cold case homicide, and was also awarded the Life-Saving Award for thwarting a shooting at a local nightclub. Throughout his career, Dave has received several commendations for going above and beyond the call of duty. Dave is also a recent graduate of the Northwestern University Center for Public Safety School of Police Staff and Command, and recently became the Detective Sergeant of the Investigations Division within his department. I'm honored to call Dave a true friend and brother. Dave is a tremendous cop, leader, and an even better person. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction.
Well, hey, man, it's the truth. You know, like I said, I mean, I had the honor to work with you for so many years, and you were, an influence on my life. And, we had a tremendous run from the time that I came on. And then we worked together as detectives, from, 2013 to 2018.
2018, yeah.
Yeah. But just to kind of rewind a little bit, it's just kind of funny that we actually met in high school.
Right. Yeah, I was 2 years older than you. 2 years older than you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then my brother, same school. It's a small world we went, It's like that.
It is.
Like connection, 6 degrees to like Kevin Bacon kind of thing going on over there.
We had a lot of a lot of mutual friends. I don't think we really hung out too much, but like I said, I loosely knew who you were from, like the basketball games and all that stuff. And I know you guys used to come out to the hockey games and cheer us on, and those are always crazy.
Well, like we talked before, there's definitely a pecking order in the whole system, and keep those underclassmen in check.
Right. I came from another department, and you and I just hit the ground running. We spent a lot of time in patrol. We had that chemistry, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit. And, chemistry is something that's either there or it's not. And you and I, it truly felt like that it was always there. And we always looked out for each other.
When you first got there, I remember, kind of like a sounding board. I only had a few years under my belt there then at the time. Obviously the transition for you coming over, you had experience though, you know what I mean? And you came from a pretty busy town, but it's new. So a lot of questions about how the way things operated by us, and just being a sounding board. And then having that similar background, high school, stuff like that, neighborhood we grew up in and everything else. We just kind of, like you said, we hit it off and started to build that relationship and stuff like that. So thankfully for you, he helped me get into investigation, vouching for me. And then we hit the ground running from there, man. It was kind of wild once I got in that office.
Yeah. You could say that again. I mean, it's funny because sometimes we talk about like white clouds and black clouds that kind of come over.
Right.
And the type of guy that you are and who you are, you couldn't be like the nicest, more laid back guy. But I tell you what, when you came in that office with me in 2013, it seemed like you really brought a black cloud for a little while.
Wrong place, wrong time always, or something. It seemed like we were under construction. I mean, that was chaos enough. That's when we were rebuilding our station and trying to figure out what the hell's going on in investigations, let alone in the middle of a transition of rebuilding an evidence room, which I had no idea anything about and stuff like that. And you and I were kind of just trying to figure out what the hell we were doing through the construction. And then my daughter was born, and I remember getting home from the hospital and just had put my boys to bed. And it was wild. The phone rang, and you're doing your thing, asking me about how everybody's doing and whatnot and everything else. I'm just giving you kind of the 411. And then you're like, oh yeah, by the way, we just caught a homicide. And I'm like, what? Come on, man, you're messing with me.
And then this was like, what, 4 or 5 days after you came into the office, after you were given your detective button. And it was, right? Was it around that time?
Yeah, it was fast. And it was Pretty bad case. A gentleman, it was hit by a car, dragged like over 700 feet. So the scene was chaos and stuff. And you were holding the fort down until I got back from my maternity thing, like a couple days later. But yeah, I remember you refusing to let me leave the house that night.
Yeah, well, I mean, your daughter was just born a couple hours
Right.
earlier that day. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting at home and I get a phone call from work just saying, yeah, I think we just caught a homicide. I remember I'm driving in from home and I just called you. And I mean, I wanted to check in on you anyway, because like I said, I know your daughter was born just a couple hours previously.
Right.
And you're telling me everybody's good and you're finally just got home and just able to kind of relax for a couple minutes here. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, welcome to the office because we just caught a homicide. And you're like, wait, hang on, huh? And you're like, yeah, well, let me get a babysitter. I'll come in. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Now your wife is a complete sweetheart. And I remember saying like, hey man, time out. I don't need you divorced the first, week that you're in the office. Your wife just had a baby. That's what, the task force is for. I just said, hey, sit tight. We'll keep you in the loop. I'll let you know what's going on. And when we got out there, just to touch on that case a little bit, it was a pretty bad case. Yeah, it was just a poor guy. I remember at one of our factories in the town where we worked, he was just kind of sitting in his car in his lunch break. And all of a sudden he sees a guy come across from another building and just starts smashing out windows of a car in front of him, maybe a couple of rows in front of him in the parking lot. And he actually knew the owner of that car. So he jumps out of the car and he's like, hey man, what are you doing? And they turned and they ran back. The offender ran back to the car. So he chases the offender and the offender jumps back in the car and turns on the car and is about to leave. He jumps in front of the car to try to stop the guy, and the guy floors it. And unfortunately for our victim, like you said, he was dragged under the car for about 700 feet through another parking lot and ended up on a pretty busy road in our industrial area.
Did a great job on that though too. With all the chaos and everything, one of our guys, Steve, he rendered aid to that guy, and it saved his life for the time being. I think he held on for 30 days, if I remember correctly. But he succumbed to his injuries were that significant. Those guys in all that chaos did a great job gathering witnesses. It was a complete team effort, and you and I wouldn't have been that successful in solving that case if these guys didn't do the right thing when that crime had happened. The witnesses, the collaboration of everybody. You can't do this alone. You need a good network around you to be successful in investigations. So those guys, I tip my hat to them at the time being. Like with all that chaos, they did a fantastic job out there. And we were lucky enough to make an arrest in that case.
Yeah, because I believe when the first officer arrived on scene, I think he applied a tourniquet, didn't he? Because I think the victim was bleeding pretty bad from his brachial artery in his arm, and they immediately applied a tourniquet on him, saved his life. Otherwise, the poor guy would have bled out right there.
Crazier was he was a brand new guy on our department, and he was bringing his fiance through town to show her kind of like, oh, this is my new job, this is where I work. And he's driving down the street and he sees that Jeep rip out onto the main thoroughfare, and then all of a sudden like a body come after it, and he was just like, holy cow, like, what is happening here? So it was pretty wild how all that like transpired.
He was actually able, I believe, to get a partial plate, at least kind of like a rough description
of the car. Yeah, he got a good description of the car that was fleeing. I think he got partial plate. And then like the witnesses on scene, the sketch was spot on, man. That was fantastic.
I failed to say that because there was another witness that was next to our victim sitting in his car. Like I said, it was lunch break, and he saw the offender, and we had him do a composite sketch, and that composite sketch was spot on. And what really kind of broke that case is we thought something was weird about it, and the guy whose window was broken out, it seemed like he wasn't really telling us the truth. Like there was some kind of still shady about it. And come to find out, he was having an affair with the offender's wife. So, but we put the hooks to him a little bit, and we talked to him, and we finally got him to come off of it, and he told us really what was happening. So we got the wife's name, and then we kind of cross-referenced that because we found out that the offender used to work at that business with his wife. And then what we ended up doing is getting his name, finding a picture of him, doing a photo spread with him, and then our witnesses picked him out, and there we go. And, then we had a positive ID on him, and we ran it by the state's attorney's office, and they were able to give us a warrant for that. And that's right around the time when you came back in, and you came off the leave for the birth of your daughter. And I just remember when you came back in, you hit the ground running. And a lot of times, new guys, new detectives, they need a lot of seasoning when they come in, and they need to be shown the ropes. And I remember you were given the daunting task of being in charge of evidence, and you were thrust into a situation, bro.
Yeah, that was, I remember coming back, man, there was just stacks and stacks of what the ETs had collected. And I was like, holy cow. Like, I mean, it was overwhelming. You know what I mean? And like I said, got a brand new evidence room because we just went through the construction. There's really not much organization to it yet. So I guess maybe that's a good thing. I got to do it my own way and stuff like that. Like you said, coming back, and you guys had developed some stuff and everything else. And I remember, like, we had the car, and then we're in these groups, these teams, and out searching for the car. And again, going back to like that networking, which how comes back to full circle, like one of your childhood friends, we had kind of an idea, said, hey man, when you're back to work, and he's like a saturation team of out looking for bad guys, and you gave him all the info that we had, and he's got our offender sitting on his porch in custody. I was like, oh, here we go.
And that's actually a funny story because, yeah, he was on vacation, and you and I identified his address. And I think you and I sat out there for like a couple days.
Yeah.
And his car was there, everything. And we were sitting there around the clock, and this guy wouldn't poke his head out at all. So a good childhood buddy of mine that I've known since we were 5 years old, he worked for Chicago PD. Yeah, he was on the saturation tactical unit at the time. And he goes, yeah, just send me the guy's information. I'm in that district, and I'll take a look, So I sent him all the information. He's like, I'm on vacation until tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow. And he goes, we'll get him. So I remember I was the same thing. Like, I'm sitting on my couch, and all of a sudden, it wasn't even a phone call. It was like a text message.
Right.
And it was like 5 minutes later, I checked my phone. And here's this guy in handcuffs, and my buddy took a picture of him. He goes, got your guy. He'll be in the district lockup. I'm like, wait. So I call him up. And he's like, yeah, he's in our lockup. I just got him in. Send somebody to come get him.
You got an amazing way, right? He was just sitting on his porch, like relaxing with his lunch or something. And like, not a care in the world.
Nope.
These guys but snatch him. Yeah. That's the beginning of our stint. Like literally like a weekend, and
right.
How wild it is. But yeah, it's good teamwork, man. I couldn't have did anything without you. You know what I mean? As crazy as it was right off the bat and stuff like that, you were always a fantastic sounding board for me because of so much going on. Never put off, always took the time to answer any questions that I had and stuff like that. Introducing to all the, the right guys of the task force, the Larry Raffertys, the Scotty, that whole network of guys that are in there, great dudes to work with and stuff like that. And building those connections. If you weren't available, these guys were also available to me to reach out and talk to. And they always put me in the right direction, which is a good feeling.
I remember the very first time I had to do a phone dump, and to get a court order. I knew nothing about that, so I reached out to a local guy, from a neighboring department who was a phone guru. And I just said, hey man, do you have a go by, a template for a court order for a cell phone? He's like, yeah, here, I'll send it to you. Boom. He sends it to me. Now, by the time I left, you and I were both able to bang one of those out real quick in 10 minutes.
Right.
But the first time I did it, it took me an hour and a half and 6 phone calls back to this guy. But again, it was that patience. And it was that teamwork that everybody had time for you. It didn't matter. We were a team. But also, too, take a little credit for yourself. You were new to the office. And I remember when we had that pile of evidence. especially for that first homicide. I mean, it's overwhelming, A, to be in a new division. B, here you go. Now you're in charge of evidence.
Right.
But the thing is I showed you how to do it, and that was it. It was like teaching your kid to ride a bike for like one time, and you just ran with it.
At that point, there's no choice. There was so much stuff. I mean, we were talking like all those car parts and tires and like everything that came from that one. But again, like I said, many hands makes light work. And, we had a fantastic group of people out there that assisted with a lot of stuff that helps to our success. Without a good group, your success will be limited. I think, you got to have a good network of people.
Yeah. And, and plus we had bosses too that, that did trust us. We knew they knew we were going to do the right thing, and they never had to worry about us. And we always let them know what was going on. And it was just as simple as that, so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, then the chaos continued for us. I think we had, in the short time, and we're a small town, we don't get a lot, you know what I mean? It was like Mayberry, and I think we had investigated 4 homicides, 3 active, and then 1 cold case that took us a couple of years, and that was pretty taxing on both of us and stuff. But through thick and thin, we had to take care of each other, you know what I mean? There was like I think in our 3rd homicide is when that sergeant's exam had come up, and obviously we both had aspirations of getting promoted and moving up and through the ranks. It's difficult. We're both on a task force. I believe also in the middle of that homicide and the sergeant's exam, we had a call out in the middle of that investigation too, which is quite a bit. And I like I said, always have appreciated the fact that there was no competition or animosity between each other ever, in the fact of like trying to take care of each other. And we just pushed through, and eventually, 2018, end of 2018, 2019, we were both promoted.
And to get back to the chemistry is we always looked out for each other, and we always told each other what we needed to hear, not what we wanted to hear. And we were able to read each other pretty good. We knew when each other needed a break. We spent a lot of time together. We got a chance to really know each other.
Right.
And if you don't like the person that you're sitting next to, how about it, man? It could just be miserable.
No, chemistry back there is of the utmost importance. You got to get along with the person you're working with.
Yeah, it's huge, because you're with that person all day, every day. And then especially when you're out on cases that you're working, you could be stuck in a car with that person for hours, sometimes days.
Right.
And if you don't like that person, that's going to get really tight really quick,
The trust too, I mean, the time we invested with each other, meeting your family and everybody else, and knowing what you go home to every night and everything like that. There's a certain level of trust that's elevated, considering some of the neighborhoods we've been into. I remember turning the corner a couple times, and when we're out like looking for person of interest, and there's 20 dudes on a corner masked up, and it's you and I in the middle of nowhere. We have no comms with the town we're in, and you just cross your fingers and say, all right, well, we got each other's backs right here, and hopefully we get through this. Luckily, you and I, and nothing ever serious really happened.
Right.
But you got to have that trust in each other. Like, this is it. It's you and I in this, and we're both going home.
And that's the mentality that you have to have. And I remember that time. We weren't familiar with the area too much, and it was a dicey neighborhood. And I just remember, like you said, we turned that corner, you were driving, and you're like, what the hell is this? And I just go, boy, this is going to go down really quick, because at the time we were in plain clothes, but yet we had our vest covers on, we had our jackets, and you could clearly see that granted, we were an unmarked car, but people knew that we were the police. Let's face it. And like you said, they were all masked up. They had their hands in their pockets, and they're just giving us a look.
That's that high drug traffic area, right off the highway, and not being too familiar with the neighborhood, I guess. That was pretty exciting for about 30 seconds, turning the corner, being like, holy cow, like what did we just drive into?
Right. Right. And that could have went bad really, really quick if somebody wanted to. But by the grace of God, we got out of that, and we're like, okay, we're not going to go down this block again, because we would truly be on our own. And we always made it a point to work out, to do something, to stay loose, to run, to go lift weights or to go shoot, because we knew we wanted to lead from the front as bosses, and B, we wanted to be accountable to our people, and we wanted to be accountable to each other. So God forbid something happened, we wanted to be mentally, physically ready for that moment.
Oh, 100%. I think it's one of the most important things as a supervisor, being accountable to your guys. You know what I mean? Like you said, lead from the front. I've always tried to lead by example. You know what I mean? I'm out there with these guys and stuff like that. And, I hope that resonates with them. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but, you hope that resonates with them and kind of like lights a fire under their ass and, gets them going too, and just seeing like, okay, hard work pays off.
And it does. And you and I were both and are working sergeants. It didn't matter our position. If we always answered our phone, we were always pretty much on the street, going on the calls. We wouldn't jump our people's calls. We would let them handle them, and we would just kind of be in the back, just kind of watching. And, granted, like you said, if we had to get our hands dirty, we would do it.
Right.
And, but we just wanted to support our people. I remember we started developing a gang problem, and you were out there making contact with these gang members, and we had a hot bar at the time that had a lot of problem shootings. And you and the guys that were out there at the time, and you trained most of those guys, but you guys were out there getting guns and pulling people over.
I mean, it was, to me, that's just like policemen having fun. That's what the job's about. You know what I mean? Making contact, getting bad guys off the street, making really good arrests, the fact, like, again, going back to like networking, where we work, it's very unique. There's not a lot of residential area. So typically like other towns that may have contact and know somebody because they're like a frequent flyer or some fact, you know what I mean? We don't have that. These guys, they got about a 3-mile stretch that they might pass through town, and we don't always run into them. You know what I mean? Like they may be there once, twice a week and stuff like that. We worked a lot with the surrounding agencies around us that, knew these guys that would dip into our town. I think specifically was like Tuesday night, which is weird, but Tuesday night was like a big night there because there was another neighboring town that had a similar bar, but that one closed at 2 a.m. So then everybody would come to ours, after they were all liquored up and whatnot, and then they'd like to come to our town and then wreak havoc. So again, with the network, that's how we kind of started building these contacts and finding out who these guys were. And now we're photographing guys and making a book and then passing it on to you guys because we were having a lot of shootings, I think some robberies, aggravated batteries, everything like that. Try to assist in building cases for you guys. So you guys, if we couldn't get them that night, go out and make an arrest after the fact. That was just us having fun. It was a lot of guys that I ended up as an FTO training. I'd like to lead by example. And these guys were on board, man. I had a fantastic crew of like young guys that were just like, yeah, ready to go, man, chomping at the bit. Every night, like they were just like, all right, let's go. Who's going to be where? And we were calling stuff out on side channels, everything. And we were just tracking these guys down left and right and just making some pretty good arrests, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you trained a lot of these guys. You brought a lot of these guys up, obviously, before you came in the office, before you got promoted. And this was almost kind of like your own team. You taught these guys, and they just followed suit. And you were out there leading by example. And you guys were getting some great information for us. And you guys would also, if there was a case, or an incident, I would go back and you guys would do a lot of the legwork already. A lot of the legwork and the evidence was processed right. So all I pretty much had to do was find the guy, bring him in and talk to him and hope that we would get charges. Right. So all of you guys did a fantastic job out there. And then when it was time, when a spot opened up, and I just said, I kind of raised my hand and I just said, hey, what about Dave?
Well, it's appreciated. And I know they didn't know me because I was buried on midnights, just due to home life and the ease of that with small children. So anybody I saw in administration, that was just like in passing, and I was probably just a gem to see it after a 12-hour shift in the morning, after like grinding it out all night. Like
Right.
we grunt at them and like walked out the door and went home.
Your work spoke for itself. And like I said, the rest is history.
Yeah, and that's like
Um,
we hit the ground running again too, just like I said, like the stretch on midnights with the bar, working with these guys as a team. You and I had a little bit of a history, at least starting from high school, the first few years that you were here, and then again, it just came full circle when I got into investigations, and just that we're not missing a beat. We're just hitting the ground running, and we had some major cases, some work to do and stuff like that, some crazy ones. I mean, you talk about that one with the motorcycle accident.
you want to talk about that a little bit? Go
Yeah,
ahead. Do it.
yeah. I mean, like,
Go ahead.
so yeah. So there was it started out as a road rage incident, and it got out of control. And it started like I think like 2 towns. It went like a span of like 3 or 4 towns. This whole thing. And it involved a motorcycle procession that was doing like an RIP run, and a young lady that was trying to merge into their procession, and then things just got out of control, and then she tried to run over one of the motorcycles, and she gave chase, and somehow everything leads to our little town, as we say. Yeah, she T-boned the motorcycle literally into the apron of our police department lot. We had it on camera.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately for the RIP run, unfortunately for those guys, one of their members had dumped the bike, and he had succumbed to his injuries. And that's why we were called in, and trying to track all that chaos down after the fact. And then I remember when you and I finally had dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's, and we went out looking for our offender at that time. She was a hospice nurse, and we actually located her at a residence. And then we had to call out that town, and I believe their fire department came and sat with that lady until they could bring relief, because we had to take her into custody. And which was
Right.
just, like, adds to the chaos of just like what is happening here. Nothing was ever very simple.
It was just a little awkward to say the least, but obviously our priority is that person. So we ended up having to call the fire department from that town, and they came and they sat with her till they got relief, when everything went smooth after that. But I mean, we had some very, the other thing, how about there was a big department store in our town. And I remember and it was freezing. It was a snowy day. And I remember you and I were going over some evidence, and we were in the evidence room, and it popped in my head. I'm like, man, we haven't had a homicide task force activation. It's been kind of quiet for us, and shame on me, bro. How about it? And what was it? An hour to the minute.
The tones went off, and you were getting ready to walk out the door. You had your jacket on, and walking out the office, and then the tones went off, and I was like, holy cow. I remember you calling home, and we're doing like lights and sirens in this blizzard. And and you're making phone calls to set up your childcare.
Right.
We're listening to the radio, and like where the offender's fleeing and whatnot and everything else. And it's just, yeah, that's the chaos of being back there. I mean,
Right.
like 60, 70 miles an hour in a snowstorm, and you're calling to make childcare arrangements.
Yeah, and you're working the radios for me. I'm working the sirens on the car. I'm on the phone trying to get childcare arrangements, and it's a blizzard, and we're going lights and sirens to this homicide.
Thank God you had a
And
big truck for that snowstorm. That made it a little easier to navigate.
oh my God. And then it was terrible. And then we get out there, and like I said, it looked like the scene out of Star Wars, like on Hoth, the wind is blowing all over the place.
Yeah.
And I left my gloves, my hat. Remember that? We had to send somebody into the store to get his gloves and hat, because we were going to be out there.
You still got that hat.
Do you? I do too, actually. I do too.
The
It's
orange
in
and green.
Yep. And yeah, and that was just a chaotic scene too. And I want to touch on that. That was like your very first case where you were the lead detective on that. And I just remember saying to you, man, hey, you know what? You're ready. You're the lead on this one. Are you ready to go? And you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And then you look at me and you're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And we took it slow. When you get to a scene like that, a chaotic scene, because, it was in a big department store parking lot. You had people around. You had the shift commander around. You had to, you had the officers that were arriving on the scene that were already there. And as detectives, when you pop out of the car, everybody kind of flocks to you. So one of the things that you and I really developed, and one of the things that we became good at, is we would usually take the shift commander off to the side and we'd be like, okay, what do we know so far? What do we have? I mean, it was good because you and I heard everything that was going on. We were still at work, but we were able to see what was going on. We were able to rope off the crime scene and really do a deep dive because the reason why you want to kind of go slow, especially if it's not a dynamic situation and it's not an active shooter, because you don't want to miss anything. So you want to elaborate on that a little bit, because you have a good perspective on that.
You said, I knew I was the next one up. Those tones go off, and regardless of who you are, I think, all your adrenaline.
Explain those tones. Explain what the tones are for people who don't know what they
are. Oh, that's just like, like when something happens in the net, the tones will go off, and you pretty much just take like radio priority, and until somebody clears it or something like that, or you find out maybe it's unfounded at that point. But ours was legit. This was a homicide. Like you said, at one of the main stores in our town. And these tones go out, and we're racing there, and your adrenaline starts going, and like he's like, "You ready?" And I'm like, "Yeah, as ready as I thought I would ever be, I guess." But you still have questions. I'm still maybe just like a year and a half in the office or whatever the case is. And I remember you just taking me under your wing and being like, "Just try to slow it down. Try to slow it down in your mind, slow it down." And it's hard, man. You got to do like, some heavy breathing, man, because and try to get your heart rate down, because once you hear that, your adrenaline's going. And like you said, you get to these scenes and you got witnesses and officers and all these guys coming up to you, like, because now this is my scene. And they're hitting you with like a ton of stuff, and you're trying to take all this stuff in, and you really got to kind of like, just like do the best to remove yourself a little bit from the situation, step back, and just kind of like take a look from a distance and try to take it all in and slow that down. Because you said you don't want to miss anything. And there is a lot going on there. And again, the cavalry's coming. We got the task force that they get called out, and we got some guys that have investigated hundreds of homicides they're coming to help you out, which is always a fantastic feeling.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much going on. Like I said, in this big department store, everybody wants to see what's going on. There's squads everywhere. And you just have to slow it down, because like I said, the task force, when they get activated, they want answers, and they want to know what's going on, because they want to know what assets that they need to bring. And then when the evidence technicians, when they show up, they want to know what they're dealing with. So it's important that you just slow things down, and that you get your thoughts together, say a quick prayer, and get to go and get to work. And that was good.
It's going to be a long day, man. That was a bad one, because it was like negative wind chills because of that wind. The snow was going sideways. That was a horrible day to be outside. But going back to like your first podcast, I remember just Larry, how great he was too. Coming back to the station, and you and I dealing with him, and he had some questions for us. But talk about taking everything in. You and I were talking to him, and he wanted to speak to the street sergeant. You know what I mean? You've got all these investigators with all this knowledge and everything else, and he's like, "No, man, I want to talk to him, because he was the first one there. I want to see what kind of insight he has." And I remember taking that to heart and just being like, wow, it's pretty amazing. He's not counting anything out ever. You know what I mean? Where he'll leave no stone unturned. He didn't care who you are. You could have been like a 1-year patrol in. He wanted to hear what you say. And I thought that was pretty cool of him. And I remember that kind of like resonating with me, where I was like, all right, I see why this guy is pretty successful.
I remember we had some newer officers on the street that day. And they even asked during one of our briefings, "Hey, do you think the task force would mind if I sat in on one of the briefings?" And I'm like, "I could ask, but I don't see why not." I went and asked Larry, "Do you have a problem with that?" He's like, "Heck no." He's like, "Bring him in."
Yeah, they used to, I remember that. He was like, they were all there before us, so they may have something that we didn't have a chance to see because they were there when the scene was active. So he wanted them all there. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty interesting. That just a way of thinking about like things, just no stone unturned. Make sure you're looking at every angle, which will help to your success.
Just having the guidance from all those guys and having those briefings. And if someone in the back of the room, it's usually the new guys, you're a new guy. I know I did. I just wanted to sit in the back of the room when I was brand new for maybe like the first couple of call-outs. I just wanted to kind of see what was going on. And the other good thing that was great about that task force, I think you and I both did this when we were new detectives. I know I did, was I knew, because I was by myself for a little while when I came in, but when I would get activated early on with the task force, what was cool is I would ask these guys, hey, you know what? I've never done a search warrant before. Can I sit with the search warrant team? And Larry and those guys would be like, yeah, absolutely. And then the next call out, I would say, hey, you know what? I was with the search warrant team last time. Can I go with the canvas team this time? They'd be like, yeah, go ahead, and so on and so forth, and then I'd be like, hey, can I watch or be a part of an interrogation? Yeah, go ahead. They encouraged you to learn. And if you raised your hand and just said, hey, can I go to an autopsy? I haven't been to an autopsy, and they'd be like, go ahead. I mean, they were really good, and they really rewarded the guys who really humped and were out there working and that were interested. They really wanted you to learn, and it was just great. It was a great time, and it was, that task force and was just great to be a part of.
Yeah, they were always great about that kind of stuff. Like, they'd throw you into the fire. You know what I mean? But I think, they weren't like hanging you out to dry in any sense. You were always with somebody good and everything else. I remember, like you said, like they would just kind of grab you. Hey, I need you over here. I'm like, hey, what's up? And you're super excited about like what kind of job you're going to get and everything else. And I remember like one of my first interviews, and they're like, hey, you're going in there to interview like one of these guys for this homicide. And I was like, wait, what? I'm not interviewing somebody for like a retail theft or like some simple battery or something like this. This is a murder. This is big time. And this is what you signed up for. But again, the adrenaline goes through and you're like, what am I going to do here? And you get all excited and everything else. And he sent me in with one of their guys.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic guy. Actually, he's now the head of the task force. And that was who my first interview was with. They do take care of you. They're not that throw you into the fire, but they do take care of you and make sure that you're with somebody that's going to give you some good support and stuff like that.
It was kind of funny because my first homicide interview with the task force, I remember we identified the offender, and he's like, all right, you, maybe like 5, 6 of us. Then they're like, this is our offender, go grab him up. So it took us a little while. We went and we grabbed him up. We brought him back to the department. And I remember we put him in the interview room. So I was just walking by. I think I told you this story. I'm walking by and I go, hey, Larry, I go, yeah, just so you know, the guy's in the interview room. And, Larry's busy, getting paperwork together, checking some things. And he just goes, yeah, go grab this one other detective who was very versed in interviewing. And he goes, get in there and interview him. I go, what? And he looks up at me. He goes, yeah, go grab so-and-so and get in there and interview the guy. And like I said, I had no experience really interviewing anybody for a homicide. So like you said, it's overwhelming and it's kind of scary. And I said to him for the third time, I go, wait, what? You want me to go? And I remember he had the papers in his hands and he looked up at me and he very sternly said, what part don't you understand? Go grab so-and-so and get in that room and talk to that guy.
Right.
I'm like, yes, sir. So I went and I grabbed this other detective and he goes, oh, you're going in there with me? All right, cool. Let's do it. So I remember it ended up being like a 5-6 hour interview. For the first 2 hours, I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word. I'm just kind of sitting there with my hands on my lap, just looking at this guy. And I remember this detective kind of sensed that I was just sitting there, and he just, at one point, he just looks at me and he goes, so what do you think? And everybody's watching on cameras, everybody's watching through the two-way glass. And I just thought to myself, it was almost like Ralphie in the Christmas Story, where it's like, don't blow a kid when he gets to meet Santa Claus, And I just started talking. And after a few minutes, I found my rhythm. And it was just a good back and forth conversation. And after, like I said, 5-6 hours, we were able to get the confession out of him. And I remember walking out of the interview room, just kind of like mentally exhausted, because that's just taxing and exhausting.
Yeah.
It is. And I just remember Larry just grabbing me and literally pulling me into another room. And I remember him kind of pointing at me and he just goes, see, he goes, have some faith in yourself. You're going to do good here. He goes, congratulations. You did a phenomenal job. And that really springboarded me into having the confidence and to build on that.
Right. And that's like, all your departments, they could send you to whatever, you could go to all these classes, and everything else. And I'm not taking anything away from the classes. They are good classes, lead house, interviews, stuff like that. But nothing really prepares you for, like, you're there sitting eye to eye, looking this guy in the eyes for a homicide, and your job is to get this confession. And that's, nothing prepares you for that in that aspect through these classes. And you have to jump in with both feet and rely on the guys that are out there helping you through these interviews and stuff like that. But nothing prepares you for that. It's a really uneasy feeling at the beginning, but you start getting into it and then it slowly dissipates and you get more comfortable doing it.
And it's reps. It's like anything else. It's just getting in there and doing it. And it's, getting your reps in like any other sport that you would do. I know you're a big basketball player. You're not going to go out there day one, minute one, and start shooting like Michael Jordan. It's thousands and thousands of reps. And a lot of times, I know you and I refined our skills by the smaller cases, whether it be the thefts or the burglaries. And then when the bell rung and we had to really get in there and talk to people on either sex assaults or, murders or whatever, that gave us the confidence. And then again, I want to touch on the chemistry, that you and I had when we would go into an interrogation room. We just knew when to shut up and we knew when to speak. And if you and I went in there together, same thing with the suspect or whoever we're talking to, you may have had phenomenal chemistry and you kind of see that right out of the gate and you have to read those situations. And I would just take those back seats and I would be the guy that would just either take the notes or just kind of sit there.
Well, we've been through that before. It was kind of funny. I forgot where we were at, but one of the jails, and we were doing an interview, and I walked in, and the guy literally pointed at me. And he says, "I don't like you. I ain't talking to you." And I was like, all right, I guess I'm done. Like, you're not done because you just sit there listening is a huge skill. And especially when it comes to interviewing people. And even though he's talking to you, he may not be thinking about too much of what he's saying, I guess. So if you could trip him up in a lie somewhere, or what he's contradicting and stuff like that, listening is a huge part of it too. So don't feel that like just because you ain't talking in an interview that like you're not doing anything. Actively listen. You may pick up on things that may contradict his story, which could ultimately get you a charge in some sense or something like that. You're sitting back there. And that's the thing, like the yin and the yang. You may be sitting there talking for 10 minutes, as long as I'm actively listening and stuff. We could bounce things off each other, or I may have a follow-up question to something that you guys were talking about, where now he's like backpedaling.
And that's where a lot of times, if I was doing the talking and you were doing the listening, you would come up with something, you would come right up over the top sometimes. And it would just be like a great question that I didn't think of, because the way I look at it is when people are talking, it's like a conveyor belt of information that's going by, and you have to pick out the information that you believe is true. And then you have to kind of like build a house on the information that they're giving you. That listening is just so important. And then when you do come up with that question or questions could just be what makes it. And then there's times where, hey, you know what? Someone really doesn't like you, and you have to be able sometimes to bow out of that interview altogether. And that's hard because nobody wants to be on the sideline. But like you said, that doesn't mean that you're out, that you're out of it. You could be like in another room texting me, or you could be, again, still listening and obtaining that information. You could be on, your computer checking, certain information that he's giving you in real time. And you could be texting me and just saying, hey, ask this, and vice versa. We did that all the time with each other.
Well, we would typically always want to gather as much information about whoever you're going to interview before you interview the person. You build that wall around them, and you kind of like stack it as high as you can and whatnot. And we have all that information. And sometimes it's hard to grab that information on the fly when you're in the middle of an interview. You have so many thoughts going through your head, and you had all this information at your disposal. That's what like your partner is for. You know what I mean? Like they may be sitting behind the glass listening. Hey, ask them about this. Because you don't remember it all sometimes in the heat of the things when you're in the middle of the interview of things that you wanted to ask. So before you go in, that's what you want to have as much information about this person and about the story, the day, the events, or whatever that may have happened before you go in. That's where you start getting them tripped up in certain stories that they're telling. Even though you're out of the interview, maybe because even they might not like you, they might not like the way you look or whatever the case was. You're still in the game. There's things you could offer to your partner, whoever's in that room interviewing the people.
To touch on where obtaining the information on somebody is so important, is there are times where we got to talk to this person for whatever reason, whether they're a suspect, whether they're a witness, whatever the case. And it might be a week, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days before we would even go out and look for them to try to talk to them. Because just for that reason, we wanted to obtain as much information about that person that we were going to talk to, because it really establishes your credibility with them. If you just walk in and you pull them in and you're going to talk to them, and you just ask them simple questions, they're not going to talk to you. Now, if you bring them in and you kind of give them information that they don't think that you have, or you talk about their friends, in their street names and where they grew up, and information about where they grew up. It could be tattoos, it could be streets, it could be
family,
the neighborhood, and you obtain that information and you sit down with them and make small talk and come at them with that information. That's huge. You'll actually see somebody's body language either relax, or they'll be like, whoa, these guys aren't playing around. And you just get to talking to them. And, you'd be surprised just by knowing what you're talking about, by doing your homework. And that's where, again, talking about slowing down. Yeah, of course, when you develop a suspect or a witness, you want to run right out there an hour later and go grab them up. But that's where you have to kind of just go, hang on a second, let's take a breath, let's obtain as much information as we can. And that's paid dividends for us over the years.
Oh, absolutely it has. Yeah. That's like you said, if you walk in, they'll read you like a book, man. They know, like, if you don't know what you're talking about or you don't have anything about, they'll know in a split second that you're on some bullshit and they ain't going to say anything to you. You gotta know what you're talking about. Again, like you said, street names, friends, family, where they're hanging out, what they've done. You could follow these guys pretty much day in, day out with social media and everything else. As long as you know what you're talking about, it'll give you some street cred in their mind. You got to have thick skin in this game too, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss things. And it's always like where you're going to rethink things in your head and you want to go back and everything else. And it's about growth. The whole job, starting from patrol into wherever you make it, even if you're a sergeant, lieutenant, chief, it's about growth, I think. And you got to be able to go back and look back at certain things, and just, you got to have thick skin, just understand mistakes are going to be made. I remember, and I have no problem sharing with that, but like my trials and tribulations of certain things that I've gone through with work. And I remember like the first sergeant's test that we took. And I remember going in and I passed the test, and now they're going to put me through the panel. And I went in and I was doing like these scenarios that they had given me and everything else. I went through it and they came out and they're like, how'd you do, man? I was like, I killed that thing, dude. I did fantastic. And, the list came out a lot lower than I was hoping. But they also gave me the opportunity to listen to their critique. And like some people may dismiss that. And they had a little DVD at the time, and I went back and I watched it, and they were critiquing on everything that I did in this whole interview process, which I think helped me second time around when I'm going back through it, watching the mistakes that I made in that. And I remember, man, there was like a citizen complaint or something that I was doing, and I was asking these questions, and I'm sitting there writing. I had my head down. I'm sitting there writing. I mean, she pretty much could have walked out the room and I wouldn't even seen her leave. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, talking about, making a connection and when you're interviewing somebody and having that eye contact and everything else, but you learn from that. And I've shared that with people. I've shared it with people outside of our agency that were getting ready to take tests. And I hope that may have helped them. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but, I don't mind sharing my experiences of, some of the stuff that's happened for me. This job is it's a roller coaster ride. There's peaks and valleys in this whole thing. I've had some ups and some very down times in police work. There's things that I've put in for, and you don't get sometimes. But you want to put yourself, I think, in the best position to make it difficult for them to say no. And I've always at least tried to just keep my eye on the prize, keep grinding it out and stuff like that, and continue to work hard, even if I didn't get things, But we just continued to work. And like I said, I always just keep grinding, and hopefully things will work out.
But that was what you just said was key, is you didn't get the position and you just went back out and you're like, okay, it wasn't my time and maybe I'm not ready, whatever the case may be. And you let your work continue to show itself, and the rest is history. Yeah. And when we just had a great run,
Yeah. And that's what some of these guys now that I've been promoted and stuff like that. I like to think that I could be a sounding board for them. If you got trouble at home, trouble at work, whatever, I'll be an ear. I'll listen to you and everything else. Just worry about what you can control. Some people get into things that are out of their control, and they get themselves pretty upset about certain things and stuff like that. And there's nothing you could do about it. What's under your control, especially in our job, you can control your daily activity of what you're going to do these days and stuff like that. Some of the decisions that are made, they're out of your control. So just keep grinding and put yourself in the best position. You never know what's going to happen. You're retired, and I'm so happy for you. You're doing fantastic. But like, I'm sure those guys that are on that list
didn't expect that.
You just don't know what's going to happen. Like how I got in investigations, there's certain things that all of a sudden they pop up, and you want to be in these positions to maybe get yourself moved into a better spot or a promotion or whatever the case may be.
Well, you and I had a little sign on our desks, when we were detectives and when we were sergeants. It said, nobody owes you anything. Work for it.
Yeah,
if you want something,
earn it.
Yeah, earn it. Now, did I make mistakes? All the time, but you have to own those mistakes, and that's okay. When you own those mistakes, instead of trying to push it off, and you own it, that's okay. And that's what gives you credibility with your people. Check in with your people. Treat your people right. Support them. I always tried to make the environment, and I know you always did too, is when people would come to work after maybe they had a fight with their spouse or they had a fight with their kid or whatever, they didn't want to have to come to work and have to deal with a supervisor who was just going to kick them in the teeth when they were down. Now, granted, we would hold them accountable for what they would do, but we were also accountable as supervisors to them, and we wanted to support our people. And you never know what someone's going through. And, if we knew somebody was going through something at work, whether it be an illness, whether it be a divorce or something, you and I have always tried to check in with them and just be like, hey, how are you? What's going on? Maybe have a cup of coffee with them. And I think that paid dividends. I'm just being thankful for them helping you out with maybe a case that you're working on or a call. And I remember there was one officer who was off, and he was going to qualify a bunch of the officers one night. And he came in for overtime to do firearms qualification. And it was just one of those nights. We were just getting hammered. And I just called him up and I said, I know you came in to qualify the shift. I said, but we're just getting hammered. I can't give you anybody. And he's like, all right, cool, no problem. 2 minutes later, I look behind me and he's there. Hey, man, what do you need? I'm like, hey, man, we just got this gun and we got this and this. And he's like, I'm in, I'll help. But that was the culture that you and I tried to produce with our people, is trying to set a good tone, because he didn't have to do that. And he could have just went home. But I like to think it was because of who we are and what we did that this officer did that for us.
Yeah, I think you always got to be accountable to these guys. They need you to try to make their lives a little bit better. If that's just listening to them about something they got going on or whatever the case, just be accountable to these guys when they need you. And sometimes they may have questions for you, and there's several times that you may not have the answer, and just tell them, hey, I don't know, but I'll do my best to find that out for you, or get you in the right direction of what you're looking for. Because it's okay not to know. I mean, this thing, it's ever changing. Our job, as you know, right before you left, the new rules they had put in place, and that's these guys have these stressors too. First off, nobody's calling us to their house, to their business, because they're having a great day. You know what I mean? Everybody's calling us because it's probably the shittiest day of their life, or one of the shittiest days of their lives. And they're there, and you're supposed to be their counselor, their protector, and whatever else they need. And this is what these guys live in, day in, day out. And then you get the external stressors.
You need that support sometimes, and it does. It just goes a long way. It does.
Great job, that boy.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff. It does wonders.
It does. Or even, if the opportunity arises where you write them up for accommodations.
Correct.
You know what I mean? It's great sometimes that, that they do go above and beyond the call of duty. Write them up for it. What's the worst that could happen is that a supervisor above us says no. Okay, but all right, then, but that was few and far between. If we put somebody in for it 99% of the time, they got it.
Stay the course. Like I said, policing's a roller coaster ride. It could be internal stuff. It could be outside stuff that's interfering with it, the news, the media. Like I said, everything that the police are going through right now. It could be family stuff, but just try to stay the course. Put yourself in the best position that you can to make it difficult for people to say no to you. That means getting your hands dirty and getting to work. Absorb as much as you can. Take as many classes as you can. Talk to people at your department that are more seasoned, that that are putting in hard work and stuff like that, and try to surround yourself with those people. Like I said, I had a fantastic group when I was in patrol, when we were working all those gangs, the gang intel at those bars and stuff like that. I couldn't have done the work that I was doing without any of those guys. We all worked together as a team, and some of these guys, they're also promoted with me. They've put in some time. They've put in work, and now they've moved on. They've been into detective positions, and you just got to keep grinding. I mean, it is a roller coaster ride. Do the best you can to drown out that white noise. Hopefully you got some good bosses that you could be your sounding board if you do have some issues and stuff that you could talk to. Or if it's not your boy, I mean, somebody that you just work with, man, confide in find some good people around you. But drown out that white noise and surround yourself with good people, and good things will come to you.
It was an absolute honor working with you for all those years. When I decided to pull the plug and retire, I think one of the hardest phone calls when I made that decision was to you.
Well,
and
I got your back, man. You know that. And I'm very happy for you. You and I've talked. We've met prior to this when you'd come into town. And I could just see the look on your face. You're a changed man. I'm very happy for you and your family. God bless you guys. Wishing you guys great things down there.
No, and I appreciate it. And I thank God, for you getting me across the finish line. Truly, God helped out. My family helped out, to get me to the point where I am now. And I will never forget the people who helped me along the way. And you always had my back,
Likewise, I wouldn't be where I'm at today without you. You know what I mean? Getting through all these years through policing, we had to lean on each other pretty hard sometimes.
Absolutely. And it was an honor and a blessing to be able to work with you. I wish you and your family nothing but the absolute best. I appreciate your time for being on this podcast. And I know you're going to continue to do great things. Thanks, brother. Just be safe out there. And again, if anybody's watching this, please like and subscribe. All my social media will be down in the description. And again, thanks for tuning in and listening and supporting my channel. So be safe and take care of yourselves.